Hey YouTube, it's Chris from Universe X, and today I'm here for a different kind of video, kind of just like an informational PvP video kind of deal. So, first and foremost, thank you if you're watching already. Thank you for supporting the channel. Try to leave a like, comment on your experiences with the topic, and if you like the content, subscribe. So, today, I'm actually going to be talking about the current meta for anybody that's still trying to grind up through the ranks, try to get to champion. I just actually got champion this morning, and I'm pretty stoked about that. But I just wanted to kind of pass along what I've been seeing climbing so far. I actually, this week, I've been going through Master, from Master 5 up to champion, and so far, I just want to talk about the most prevalent units and whatnot. So. Number one should be no surprise. Currently, the meta is right after Gowther and Galan released. Currently, it is April 3rd, 2020 on global. So, nobody should be surprised. Absolute king of PvP right now is Gowther. It's just not even, there's just no question. Of course, if you guys, I'm not going to go into too much detail. He has an AoE attack. Get it to silver or gold, and it basically just halts them from using attack-only moves. Then you've got this card, the best card about him, pretty much. Upgrades one character, upgrades the entire team, plus 20% to basic stats for 3 turns. Neat little tricks you can use. I mean, if you have a silver and a bronze in the same hand, use the silver, it'll turn the other bronze into a silver. You'll have a constant loop of upgrades as long as you keep seeing it. It's just disgusting. Then, last but not least, because he didn't need this already, his ult is an AoE attack that does moderate damage, but also takes away 3 ult gauges unless you have him paired with King, which is going to take away all 5 ult gauges and do more damage. Now, that doesn't always seem to happen because a lot of these comps will have King on it, since Gowther turns King into just King on crack. All of his like petrifies and heals are just live from the get-go when you pair him with Gowther. Now Gowther does enable some other things, but I'll kind of get to that as I go through there. But just number one, you will see this character going through Master, probably even at this point any league if people are pulling. You're going to see this dude more than you see anybody else. Next, he is still King. Like, he just has another king that sits with him. There are 2 kings looking at each other, admiring how kingly they are. King is still just on point. He's one of the older units in the game, even though this game isn't that old for global. But you already know. He has a damaging move that turns into a petrify, he has a cleansing move that turns into a healing cleanse, and then he has an AoE nuke that doesn't deal with resistance. So the thing about him, though, is you guys already know he's a Swiss knife. Swiss Army knife. He can AoE the whole team once he gets up there. He can heal. He can petrify. I mean, he's just an all-around good unit. But with Gowther, he's one of the people that gets exponentially better because he's able to heal off of just 1 card. He's able to petrify off of just 1 card. And he gets out of control. And when you start stacking them up like normal and start getting like gold heals where your entire team just gets a reset, or gold petrifies, just put a person out of the game for 2 turns. It's just disgusting. He is one of the cards that pretty much has a stupid turn 1, depending on your last card in your hand, with Gowther. If you see 2 petrify cards and they're not next to each other, and Gowther is in the lineup too, you just upgrade King and just choose 2 of their units and just not. And most of the times, it'll break the game, especially if you're using Merlin in the back, or you're using ult food to have him at higher. Just Gowther on King, petrify their units that aren't Gowther, and already you've set them back an entire turn. Now you do have to keep dealing with them afterwards, because chances are Gowther's just going to try to boost while he's incapacitated. But it's just a monumental push. Now moving on to the next character that I consider just completely just god tier right now, you have Coinshot Bond. You guys should know what he does. He's been everywhere. Like, you just got an AoE whip. It doesn't really do too much damage. It's got like high multipliers though, or low multipliers though, but it has lifesteal on its silver and on its gold, which is important because his extort takes stats from everybody away, gives them to you. So that's actually just pretty nifty. And it over time, it just kind of makes like a war of attrition. You know, your king is healing you, your king is poking things, petrifying them. Meanwhile, Bon is, what's not petrified is being weakened by his extort and shipped away. He can do AoE damage while your team is like petrified. You can whip people and then petrify the person to keep them out of turn. You make a lot of chip damage over time. And then of course his ult just puts a 50% extort on somebody. And that's just actually disgusting. So that's actually just pretty much that. Goes up 50% minimum when you have the correct link. So with those 3 units, it should make no surprise how they are one of the most common teams in the game right now. If you're trying to grind up through Master, you are going to see no end of King, Gowther, Bon. And it's just a solid all-around team. Your opening turn, you can, if your opponent doesn't have a King, a cleanser, you can just slam them with a silver extort and then a silver whip. If at minimum. Or, you know, if your team has a target like a King, I always like to neutralize the King. You can just sit here and boost King and then petrify. Like, you can extort, petrify. I do that in that order, so King takes a little more damage from the petrify. And then your opponent has 2 units that are under extort. They can't cleanse, and petrifies just on their King. So it's a very, very versatile team. And then when you sit there incapacitating your opponent and shipping away, all of a sudden you have 2 AoE ults within a couple turns. Monsters. Now, we're going to move over to, I guess, the next kind of just tier, because those are the 3 characters I just think are just out of control right now. So the next tier are characters that are still very, very good, but just kind of need things to go a little bit of their way. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to put the OG Queen Delito herself here, Jericho. She's still very, very good, but she's not what she used to be, mainly because Gowther can do the attack down and just kind of put her out of the game, except for her bleed move. Also, she can just be petrified like any other unit, and petrify is a lot more rampant with Gowther on the board. And then lastly, due to the next card, when your opponent is super buffed up, she's just gonna be doing less damage. So she's still very, very good. Don't get me wrong. Don't get caught lacking with Jericho in PvP. It's just that she is not just the instant somebody is going to die, maybe 2 people per game anymore. Not in my opinion, at least not from what I've seen. She's pretty handleable. Actually, just to go over her, you should already know her first move applies a bleed. Her second move does triple the damage if they're debuffed, and her third move is just a freaking nuke. And of course, she gains 10% crit chance every time she uses the move, so she ramps up. Moving on to the next tier of like just not necessarily god tier, but just unreal if they get the right setup. You have Arthur. Now Arthur is interesting because on his own, he's not necessarily the strongest, but his move set allows him to do some pretty nasty things. You got just a fair amount of damage and disables recovery. That's not important. What's important is the Royal Sword. When it's at gold, it removes all debuffs from allies, increases all basic stats by 30%, and grants debuff immunity for 3 turns. If this buff goes off, you literally are fighting for your life. Like, I can't explain to you how many games have just been taken straight up from me because this guy just decided to get his gold buff and just destroy me. So don't play around with this. If you see an Arthur and a Gowther in the same match, just expect that they are trying to rush the gold buff and then sit there and just manhandle you for the next 3 turns. And the worst part about it is, chances are in those next 3 turns, they will have another one ready. So it's actually a very, very strong strategy. Requires a bit of luck because, as you guys know, the first X cards are set, but then that last card you get per turn can be from any character. So if they see double, they're already guaranteed 1 buff. If they see double buff and they have Gowther on the team, they can easily just switch the buff, boost with Gowther, activate the gold buff, bam. Their team is on God mode for 3 turns. Very, very real. Besides that, it's not like anything in this kit really stands out. He's just damage. His ult hits for a fair amount of damage, but it's not like it hits for Jericho damage. But it's still enough to kill most people. That's just human-related stats. So just be careful of Arthur. Now, the last two people I want to put in that tier. One is Galan. He's a new unit. You guys should know what he's doing because he's been kind of hyped. The first thing I want to start off is his commandment. Anybody that tries to rank up or down skills will be petrified for 2 turns. Direct Gowther counter. Whether or not he's actually countering the meta, it's kind of weird because at the beginning of each game, his unique ability is going to taunt somebody. It's going to chorus somebody, and that person cannot apply debuffs, and they must attack Galan if they have to choose. So, depending on how he targets with the coercion, you have a 33.3 or 33% chance just to wipe somebody off the map. Like if it hits Bond's almost useless. He can't extort, so his moves hit like wet noodles, and he can't extort. If it hits King, it's not as bad, but King can't petrify, and that's a huge game changer. If it hits Gowther, whatever, he just can't lock their attack, which can come into play, but chances are by the time you start pinning them down with that, you might already have Galan out of the way. The real craziness comes from Galan's S, or his Ultra, because he's going to hit somebody and then increase his stats by 50%. Oh, increase his basic stats by 50%, and that's 3 buffs, which leads me to his nuke, which is the one stroke. Not name. But it does amplify damage, so 30% more damage per buff. And so when you start kind of ranking up, he just hits for massive damage. So you'll hit for 30,000 damage on like an S1 or on his bronze card. This move, I don't really care for it. I don't really know why it's there. It kind of hits like nothing. So whatever. We're just going to leave that alone. But he's actually in some very, very cool comps. And I'll talk about comps kind of at the end of the video. The last person in this tier is Merlin. She is one of the best back units. It's just pretty much her and Gilthunder, almost unanimously, her and Gilthunder, because she allows you to have 1 more ult gauge, which means if you get outsped by the CC, you're going to start with 2 ult gauges, or if you use ult gauge food, 3 ult gauges, which makes it incredibly easy to start doing AoE sweeps on the clapback. It makes getting outsped not even necessarily too bad depending on the setup of your opponent. But more importantly, I think the reason why I like Merlin in the back is because Merlin has insane late game potential. When you're only down to 2 units, it's disgusting to be able to start throwing up shields. The shields will really put your opponent behind unless they get their ultimates, which, by the way, Merlin is able to start pecking away at with her ult. From what I've seen in a lot of my games, if my last 2 units are Merlin and Gowther, it's almost like a wipe. Like, it may take a long time, but my opponent normally can't break through it because I can control the ultimates, I can lock their attacks, and through locking their attacks with Gowther and controlling their ultimates with Merlin, and then putting up shields whenever I can, eventually you're just left with a bunch of people that can't damage you, and you sit behind your turtle fort, and then you AoE hit them with Gowther for ult bars, and then you can AoE pick one off with her, which also applies disable attack skills. So she has crazy 4th man potential. Love it, love it, love it. I guess while we're at it, I might as well talk about Gilthunder. Gilthunder is still a great 4th man. He just gives 30% to defensive stats during PvP only. The only thing is that he's kind of like, he hits like trash. He gives an attack buff, but depending on who's left over, that attack buff may not do anything. Like if it's just Gowther and Gilthunder, your attack buff doesn't really mean too much. So that's always going to be kind of a thing. Honorable mentions for people, okay? You can still end up using Red Merlin. Not as popular, but Freeze can still get very, very, very annoying. The only issue is if you run up against those Arthur comps, you are going to get stomped if they establish their blue buff, or their gold buff, because this character will do absolutely nothing to that team. It's a little bit of a risk. Another honorable mention is Green King. He still is a crit monster. However, at the same time as being a crit monster, he's still a green DPS unit with no utility. So chances are he will get smashed just like other green units with no utility, like Jericho. It will treat him the same way, except he doesn't kill like Jericho kills. At least not as fast, but he does have an AoE attack that will hit like monsters. Another honorable mention is Dian. I haven't used her ever, But wow, that wasn't necessary. But um, she still got like an AOE ult, and that's actually just really good. Sometimes you'll still see her paired along with King in ult rush teams, like her, King, Elizabeth, and Merlin in the back to just and the ult gauge food, so they can just AOE clap your team with 2 AOE attacks. So that's still pretty cool. The only other thing that I say kind of catches me off guard every now and then would be Red Slater. Red Slater actually has this move. Decreases attack related stats by 20%, disables everything but attack skills but for 2 turns. If you get hit by that and you can't cleanse it, he essentially nullifies an enemy. And that's nothing to scoff at. It just isn't. It will put you into a trash can depending on the character it's used on. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about is I guess the teams, right? Like if we're just looking at teams, the most common, like I said, the most common team that I've been seeing is this one. Literally this team. Gowther, King, Bond with Merlin in the back if you want to rush ult faster, or Thunder in the back if you want to take less damage. Like I said, it's got excellent synergy. You got Petrifies, you got heals, you got Extort, you got AoE damage, you got attack ceiling, you got ult gauge manipulation on ult. You have 2 AoE ults. You have in your last man more ult gauge manipulation and shields. It's just a all-around good thing. It can be outsped. Like, I mean, there are other comps that can just out damage it. There are other comps that can do wonky things around it, but 9 times out of 10, actually probably like 7 times out of 10, you're gonna see that this is just a very solid comp that more or less just gets it done. Not really any bad matchups, but it doesn't really necessarily have any great matchups. It's like if you ever played a card game, I would say it's the best deck in format. Doesn't always win, but it wins against most of the board. The other team that I've been seeing that's been actually really getting annoying is this gal, okay? This one. Not that one. Definitely not that one. It's actually this team. This team has been getting super annoying for me. So, the whole purpose of this team, okay, is, like I said, to open up with 2 Arthur buffs, or, if you're lucky, to open up with 2 Gowther buffs and your Arthur buff. So there's 2 different hands you can do. You can either switch Arthur's buff to make it a silver, then boost it with Gowther, then use it, and everybody gets that huge increase in debuff immunity. Or you can just Gowther on Arthur, use the buff. So there's, I mean, literally there are 6 cards that you can get in that last slot, and it's 2 of them could lead to that combo. So you gotta, again, like, 1 out of 3 chance. So 33.33% chance of just knocking that combo out, and it's pretty devastating when it happens. On top of having your basic stats increased by 30% and debuff immunity, Thunder will prevent you from taking damage because he's going to give 30% more defensive stats. Meanwhile, Bond can extort you, and it's going to be able to leave you, like, your cards won't hit for anything. If you don't have a cleanser, it's most certainly game because Arthur and Bond will rip through your team, and when you get to enough ult gauge, Gowther's ult will just swipe it away. Very destructive team, only a little bit RNG involved, but some people are feeling the 33.33% chance. Weaknesses? It doesn't necessarily have a weakness outside of its RNG. Some people say like Galan will counter it, but Bond can handle Galan pretty hard if he doesn't get coerced. So it's kind of, it's a little weird. And also, if you get the Arthur buff off, like if you see the 2 buffs and 1 Gowther, you can give debuff immunity and it doesn't matter because now Gowther can't be petrified. So not really weakness as much as other team comps. But past that, I found that it's just been very hard to deal with. And when I see the buff go off and I know I can't petrify them, I just start using my petrifies separately on Arthur because I want to get him off the field. I just try to rush my ults on both Arthur and Gowther because on my Arthur. Wow, I try to rush my ults on Gowther and King to wipe the field, and it doesn't always work. But when it does work, it's satisfying because you pretty much clear the entire team. But yeah, it's just a strong comp. Another comp I've seen, that there right there. This is pretty neat because lots of people are like, oh wait, it's Galan and Gowther on the same team. Well, if you've looked at JP, it still works, especially with this comp because again, you've got Guild Thunder soaking up damage. Galan is a stat stick for a lackluster kit, not lackluster kit, but a weird kit to get going. He's a stat stick, but he can pin people down with the coercion. He's got his commandment on deck, and if Gowther sees, if you see the Arthur combo, you just use it, and now you have the amplify with 4 different buffs on Galan. So his first move hits like a massive truck, and he can easily get to his ult turn. And then Gowther is now immune to debuff, so he can't be petrified by the commandment, and Arthur is just his Arthur self. So it's a very strong team, just a little variation in the combo play. People still kind of swap in Jericho to a lot of these teams. I've seen this team right here. I've seen this team right here. I've still seen this team right here, wherever my blue king is. Yeah, I've seen this too. It's just that there's a lot to play around with in PvP right now. But as you can see, the most used units in most cores are Gowther and King, followed by Gowther and Arthur. Bond is probably the singular most used unit outside of Gowther. I think like it's kind of wild. But if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I can answer any questions to the best of my ability, and I would actually love to. So besides that, I like to hope you guys are having a good time playing Global, playing 7 Deadly Sins. I'm having a great time. I hope this gave you guys some information you can use to get to champion. And like I said, I'm trying to answer any questions you have down in the comments. So thank you guys for your time, and I will see you next time. Peace.